So in estate planning, often clients ask us, what is the ideal or what is the best way for us to transition our family wealth? And so we put together this presentation, which is really our collective thoughts and approach brought together to support you to have a healthy and meaningful conversation in your family about this difficult subject. You've worked hard, you have amassed your own wealth, and now when it comes time to transition that to family members, you may be thinking, well, exactly how should I do it, or how should I talk about it? And so the purpose of this webinar today is to take you through what that can look like and how we could help. So our families grow, and in Canada, we move to different parts of the country. Very few Canadian families that I know have everybody living in the same province. We lead divergent lives, and over time and over distance, our families change, and yet we think of our family as one. But is it? In most families, there are different needs. Sometimes there may be competing interests between siblings, and it is more complicated than just one big happy family, although, of course, we think of ourselves as one big happy family. And so we need to actively think and plan, how would we transition our wealth? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad McPhee, and I define myself, my work self anyway, as helping affluent families celebrate their prosperity. And I am lucky enough to lead a team of 4 partners. Zach, Sherry, Ross, and I are the partners. We are supported by 2 executive assistants, Dylan and Moyo, and we have a local specialist team here out of our office, Scott, Jason, and Patty. But in addition to that, we have a legal and specialist accounting team, including offshore accounting, through our head office in our private wealth management and planning. So what are we going to talk about today? How to transition family wealth, and what are the 3 key pillars for success? So the first, and sort of the linchpin of it all, would be communicate. But in order to communicate effectively in our family group, we need to actually consider a whole bunch of different things. So family dynamics, what is the reality in our family, or specific or particular to our family? Is there a child in the family who has more difficulty with keeping their spending down? And finally, we need to create a family plan, and that meets your needs today, because after all, you're the one who has amassed the wealth, and we're talking about how to transition the wealth, sort of when to do it, and also how to do it. So those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about today: communicate, consider, and plan. So it's easy to communicate with our families, and we communicate with our families all the time, but sometimes it can be challenging or uncomfortable. And often it is those we are closest to that it's uncomfortable with if we're going to talk about something like our finances. You may or may not have taught your children about the amount of wealth that you have already amassed. And I know in my own family, it was something that was often treated with humor. And so when it comes to emotional topics like money and death, which is really what transitioning family wealth is about, it's not as easy as we sometimes think it could or should be. So why does it matter? Well, about 70% of affluent Canadians, and if you're here today, it's because you're an affluent Canadian. If you're already a client of ours, then congratulations, because that means you are affluent. We're a private wealth management team. And 70% plan to leave something, but only 57% say that they are reasonably well prepared to execute their future wealth transfer. And I can tell you, when it comes to our practice, we have about 300 affluent Canadian families. And the vast majority of them have questions around estate planning. We have a whole estate planning process to help. But these are the important considerations, not sort of the legal documentation. So the first thing is life seldom goes as we expected it to. The second reason it's important is we all want to sleep well at night, and there are those things that keep us up. And as we age in particular, and you think about the transition of your family wealth, there's probably some issues that spring to your mind, questions that you'd like answered. And the third thing is productive conversations like this, they don't really happen by chance. So I want you to go back in time and just think for a moment of your life 25 years ago. So 25 years ago, Dolly the sheep gets cloned. NASA has just landed one of the rovers on Mars. And The Lion King has just come out on Broadway as a musical. So what did you think was going to be happening with your parents? What did you think your children would be doing 25 years later? And what did you think you yourself might be doing as you prepared for retirement? Life seldom goes as we expect. Your parents may need expensive accommodations. My own father, who is now 94, got dementia last Christmas. And so this year he's been struggling with that, and his accommodation costs had gone up to $13,500 a month. We discovered through asking the right questions, because I've been lucky enough to deal with many people at this stage of life, that if we moved him into a different room, that the Ontario government, which is where my dad lives, would take over, and that would cut the living expenses down to $6,500 a month, because he would qualify for supports through the healthcare system. Another example is children may not be able to afford a first home. Many of our clients here in Vancouver have given money to their children to be able to buy their first home. And they are trying to balance their childcare costs while still paying off their education debts. So it can look quite a bit different than what we thought 25 years ago life might look like, either for ourselves, our parents, or our children. So how do we actually come to calm? How do we dispel worry and get a better peace of mind? Well, interestingly enough, the research shows that the first thing that we can do is actually write it down. And sometimes when we're doing this exercise with a client, when we're helping them through this process, we'll suggest that the spouses actually do it individually, put down in writing what's on their mind. And the reason for that is we sometimes think there's harmony when there actually might be a disconnect. And if we put it down in writing, we'll have more of a tendency to do one of two things. A, we can let it go because now we've stated it, we can see it in writing. And B, we'll be more likely to talk to our partner about it because we've each gotten it written on our list. Hey, honey, why don't you tell me what's the first on your list? And so on. And the second thing is start the conversation with a trusted advisor. So if you're already a client and you're online and perhaps there's only you and not your spouse here, you can start by talking to us. We can help you come to some clarity on what it is that's really bothering you. Interestingly enough, this entire process of how to help families actually was a course that I took down through Wharton University, that specifically how to hold family meetings, and it was a day long because it's not as easy as it sometimes appears to be, and we've helped a couple of clients through this process already. So productive conversations don't really happen by chance. So here's a few tips for the family conversation about wealth transfer. The time and place are key to successful meeting. In the course I took, for example, it said, don't ever meet at the family business. And the reason often is not all kids work in the family business. So it's better to meet somewhere neutral or somewhere that the family has fun. For example, your recreational property is a good idea. So choose a place where everybody is comfortable. Share your intentions and explain your reasons. And it's actually important to actually consider, like, who should we be inviting? Who comes to the family meeting? Like, for example, do we invite our grandchildren, or do we simply have our children, or do we have our children and spouse? And the right answer to that is, dependent on age, that you need the children and the spouse. So everybody is there. And the other thing that was very interesting that I learned when I took the course was, the most important thing about this meeting is that it is fun. People should have had fun being there. So in one particular case, we designed a game of family trivia, like playing Trivial Pursuit, except all the trivia was actually things that had happened in the family over the years. Listen to the concerns and the individual goals. Keep the approach positive at all times. This isn't a family argument or competition between kids. And always start from the period we are now, looking forward. We don't look backward, and we don't make any judgments. No matter what's being said, remain neutral. And then the other thing, of course, you can do is consider including your financial advisor to provide support and context. I know in some of our client families, when they are going to have difficult decisions with children, for example, they want to give money to buy the house, but they want to make sure that the young couple doesn't get divorced because they just got married last year. So we suggest they do a promissory note. Often, one of our team might be the person who presents that to the children. This is easier than the parents saying it, because in fact, what's happening is I'm saying to the children, it is I who have recommended to your mom and dad that it be done this way, and here's the reason why. We do also have some tools. We've got one tool that can help you create a family mission statement. And so that's sort of an easy first place to start. And then we have a great brochure that is how to plan for your legacy. And it asks you the real questions that you'd have long before you're ever talking to the kids or other members of your family about what you're thinking and what your plans are. Now, moving on to the next topic, what are some of the things that you should really think about and consider before you do your wealth planning transfer? And it's really important at this stage to be honest and realistic about the family situation. And this is why it's important to have a trusted advisor, because many of the things that individuals have shared with us about their families over the years are extremely personal and private. They can be the thoughts about the parents, the true thoughts of the parents on their children or their children's spouses. So you yourself need a safe place to be able to talk about it and then organize how you're going to deal with it. And why that matters is because in reality, from our perspective, we're not a member of your family, so we're able to help and be a little more neutral. Here are some of the concerns that people have. About a third of people worried that their children won't be able to handle their inheritance. More than a quarter of Canadians don't actually trust the spouse of their child to manage the inheritance. So we see this all the time. We have a case right now where we really believe it is the daughter-in-law who is forcing the son to behave a way that is not in the best interest of his mother. And then 20% of the time, they worry that the children will go through it all and there'll be nothing left to pass on to the grandchildren. So here are the different types of things that can impact your children's ability. External factors, for example, right now we've got high inflation. So if in a period of high inflation, you start withdrawing out of your investments too quickly, you can lose months worth of retirement income. So that all has to be planned. Their children may not have a good financial knowledge. So although the parents were well-to-do or ran a business and were very good at doing that, that doesn't mean it's a gene and it's automatically built into their kids. And then 18% think that their children might splurge on inheritance on short-term indulgences. And so I have this to tell you as an affluent individual: do not hesitate to take that lifelong cruise that you always thought you'd like to do during your retirement. Do not hesitate to buy that slightly fancier car if you really wanted it. Go ahead and do those things, because the moment your wealth transitions to your children, they'll have no problem writing that check and getting that car vacation that they wanted, because we see this over and over again. And the last thing that people worry about is they'll lose their inheritance due to divorce. And so this is why in certain situations, inheritance can go into a family trust. Inheritance in the province of British Columbia, and I know there's people on here from Ontario where it's different, but in the province of British Columbia, inheritance is not shared by a spouse. But if you happen to have commingled that, you use that to pay off half of the house. Now you've commingled that in the finances, and that part of the inheritance would in fact pass on in the divorce. You know, every family is unique. It's funny, and people often think, and especially when it comes to wills and estates planning, the first thing that almost everybody says is, you know, in our family, it's just really simple. And I'll go, well, you have a corporation, you own a corporation. So not everybody owns a corporation. That makes it more complex. But in reality, we want to take this really complex thing, and this thing that we might be slightly uncomfortable with, the emotions of A, our own demise, and B, how are we going to pass it on? But we need to recognize the uniqueness of our family and then be able to discuss that. And so in many, many cases, there hasn't been a thorough sort of discussion and ultimately a plan. And I can tell you that in those cases where we've done that, and we have done this for several families, it makes the transition a lot easier. It actually accomplishes two things. Thing number one, you stop worrying about it because you know what's going to happen. Thing number two, you've talked openly with the children about it when you're completely of sound mind and body. And so everybody knows this was the real way that mom and dad thought about the transition of wealth. There are other really important concepts like, does fair mean equal to you? Let me give you a very real example. We had an individual who had children, but the children were sort of generationally apart by 5 years. So you give $100,000 to your son, and your daughter is 5 years younger. When it's her turn to go, the money that you gave your son, you only gave him as a promissory note into buying a new house, and that house went up in value, and that $100,000 is now a $400,000 value. Do you then give your daughter $100,000? That would be treating her equal. Or do you want to be fair and give her $400,000 because it's not her fault she's 5 years younger, and that's how the housing market behaved? So these types of concepts of fair and equal, there's something that we get into conversations with, and we can help families decide, you know, 400 sounds like too much. Why don't we make it 250? Let's get that down in writing, and then let's be able to understand the rationale that we have for this to explain to the children, this is why it's different. We're being fair, and fair doesn't mean the same. Fair means this. There are other things that we don't forget about, but we don't want to necessarily think about because they're just complicated. What about blended families? There's one person in the family who perhaps has a special need, either emotional or physical disability. There might be issues with budgeting and spending money. Young children, and then your other children, let's say you had 2 kids, one had 3 grandchildren, one has no children. There could be a family business. There's vacation property. It could be in Canada. We've got lots of clients who have property, including myself, outside of Canada. There may be family heirlooms or sentimental items. You know, we had a family that there was one painting. The painting was worth $700,000. 2 children. Each of the children believed that it had been promised to them. After dad dies suddenly, this became a big problem. It would have been much better if there was something specifically in the instructions for the will that said, this painting belongs to, and my child who inherited must pay out the balance to the other child. It would have saved a lot of stress and strife within the family. So let's just look at a real life situation. This particular story is a true story, but the names and the details have, of course, been changed to protect and provide anonymity. So here's what we were told at the beginning. Barry is a man in his mid-50s. He's the founder and the only shareholder of a manufacturing company based here in British Columbia. The business is doing really, really well, and it's expected to grow. It's on a trajectory of growth. And he is going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. He's not exactly sure when. She wants him to retire a little earlier. He's not sure. So he says 5 to 10 years. He's married to Micah, and she's not active in the business at all. And they were referred to us to discuss succession planning for their business as they looked ahead to retirement. This was great, because we previously inherited a client who had actually signed the deal to sell their company, not realizing the company structure was set up in a way that cash within the company, which in this case happened to be $1 million, was not properly structured and was included in the sale. So they actually sold their company for $1 million less than they thought they were getting, because that's how much cash was in the company. They thought it was theirs, but the deal wasn't structured properly. So getting and talking about these things early with a neutral third party who can help you with the analysis is absolutely important. So here's what happened in the conversation. So that's what we're told, but here's what happened in the conversation. Micah is Barry's second marriage. Barry and Micah have 2 children together. Their son, Patrick, 22, he is in the first year of med school, and he has never been active in the business. The daughter, Stephanie, is involved in the business, but she isn't sure if she will continue in the business, and it's not something that her dad has actually even ever asked her about. Barry also had a son, Peter, from his first marriage. Peter has never been active in the business, and he's a successful lawyer in New York. So even though Peter isn't in Canada that often, they all love spending time at the family cottage. So you now can see the issue. We've got somebody living outside of Canada, and they're going to inherit part of a Canadian asset. How are we going to do that? And so this is where tools such as trusts or other complicated ways of setting things up that make sure that there aren't undue taxes or undue financial burdens on one of your inheritors. So here were the key considerations and strategies that we went through. Should we sell the business to a third party or transition to Stephanie? It was interesting in this case because there actually was a manager in the business who wanted to take over the business, and Stephanie wasn't really that interested. So that meant how to structure a financing plan that an employee could take it over. What would that look like, and the complexity in that? And then if we're going to add, so if Mike is going to do something, let's say she's going to start doing the books, should she be introduced as a shareholder? So there was no shareholders, including his daughter. Stephanie was getting paid by the business, so she was an employee, but she wasn't a shareholder. None of the kids were. There were investments within the corporation. So how are we going to manage them and make sure that they were properly set up? So when the business was sold, if that's what was going to happen, they wouldn't be lost in the sale. If Stephanie is going to take it over, then we needed to have a life insurance policy within the corporation so that she could afford to, so her dad dies, she inherits, the money goes into the corporation, and then Stephanie is allowed to pay out her brother and sister in real cash so that they are inheriting equally. Do we need a family trust? Of course, it was a blended family, so all the issues around obligations to a former spouse, and in British Columbia, there's the Wills Variation Act if somebody wanted to challenge that. And then we had to deal with the vacation property, and then, of course, We had the wills, the power of attorney, the advanced healthcare directive. So lots and lots of considerations and strategies from something that Barry and Micah thought was very simple. Hey, we're simple. We've done well. Yes, we've amassed something, but I'm the owner of the business. There's only one owner. And so it's all kind of simple. That's the way the conversations normally start. But as you can see, that's not really how the conversations continue. So the next thing becomes, after we have thought of how we're going to communicate, and then we've gone through all the considerations of what's the reality that we're living within, and then the next thing that we have to do is plan. And there was an author, his name was Napoleon Hill, and he was the author of the best-selling classic Think and Grow Rich. And he suggested that financial success is largely a result of him writing down his own goals. And what we know in the study of our field is that when we take the time to consider and then actually commit into a plan, it makes it more realistic to help keep us on track. And it also makes it easier for us to change our mind, because if we have it all laid out and then we decide to do something different, we know what it will affect. So, thinking about your wealth transfer, there's really 4 important considerations. We need to identify all the tax saving opportunities for the entire family. So if we look back at the story of Barry and Micah, what needs to be done in order to protect the son who's living as a lawyer in New York? Is he always going to live there? Is he going to return to Canada? Is in fact he going to use this summer house? Does he need to own part of the summer house, or could he be bought out of that? Implement any kind of insurance strategies that mitigates. So if Stephanie is going to buy the company, we need a whole life insurance policy that gives her the money. It's non-taxable when it's purchased. It's non-taxable when it's used. So it's a fantastic strategy to transition wealth in a family with a corporation. Maximize your current lifestyle. So this is important from Barry and Micah's perspective, that they actually get to live the life that they want to live, that it's not all about the transition. It's also about how do we live our life and how do we do the transition and when do we do what parts of the transition. And the last thing is strengthen the family relationship, because we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have the conversation before the fact. You're going to have a chance to talk about your real thoughts and feelings. Your children are going to have a chance to input and say what they want and need. When we're having a family meeting, everybody hears everybody else talk. So that's transparent. It makes it easier to understand why mom and dad made the decisions that they made, because everybody has heard everybody talk. Our focus as a team is on managing lifetime financial well-being. So if you're on this call now and looking at transitioning wealth, you're already managing cash flow. You've dealt with the unexpected. You're probably done with major expenditures other than maybe the recreational home, or maybe doing some updates to that. You already may have an idea of how to optimize your retirement. It's really about sharing your wealth and maximizing your business success. All of those, we have supports and services for clients because we're a private wealth management planning team, and we deal with affluent people, many of whom own a corporation. It all starts with you, and we are very used to working with our clients' legal and accounting and bookkeeping teams. For those issues where clients don't have it, for example, in the cross-border issue, if we look back at this situation with Brian and Mika, they needed specific assistance around US tax law. We have some internal supports at IG's head office, but here in Vancouver, we actually have worked with a law firm for over 15 years now, who gives opinion letters and actually helps our clients understand deeply, and their accounting people understand deeply, what are the issues in the transitioning of wealth. Sometimes it makes a great deal of sense to actually write your wills, and then we have an accounting or tax and legal specialist review the will after the fact. So this is a different lawyer than who would have written it. So there's your people. You are in the center. We're up sort of as the coaches, helping get you to people. And we have preferred partners that we can recommend who we know are skilled and have the ability to give you the expertise that you need. IG Wealth Management, or we're part of IG Private Wealth Management. We have been in business for over 90 years. We are one of about 2,000 advisor practices across Canada, and we have 3 CFPs on our team. We have one of the top designers of the IG Living Plan. We have spent a lot of time. Sherry Hoover, who is one of our partners, has extensive experience in modeling for clients. We have billions of dollars in assets under advisement, and we are able to work with the top investment managers on planet Earth so that our clients are able to buy into the best investment vehicles that are available in the world today. Here are a couple of closing thoughts. The dynamics within your family vary, and talking about money is not easy for everyone. That's okay. Don't worry about that. It gets easier once you actually start the conversation. Secondly, sometimes the easiest place to gain peace of mind is just an initial conversation with somebody from outside of your family. If you are already our client, I would invite you to talk to any member on our team about this. We're here all the time, and we're happy to help you with this. With our help, it's never too early to actually start to put the transfer plan in place, and you don't have to feel like it's set in stone, because it's not. The wealth transfer plan is a living document, just like everything in your financial life is a living plan, and we're here to help whenever you want to change it. So as your family needs evolve, so will your plan. So what are the next steps? If you are not already our client, we'd be happy to meet with you. There is no obligation. We believe in earning business, and we don't expect people to do business. We invite you to do business with us, and we add 2 or 3 new affluent families each quarter of the year. And if you are our client or you're not our client, we are certainly happy to share additional information on any of the topics that I've talked about today. So you can just reach out to us. And in fact, if you're on this presentation today, it means that you've registered and we have your email. And I will be sending you a thank you tomorrow with a short 5-question evaluation. It shouldn't take you longer than 15 seconds to complete, but please go ahead and add any comments that you want. I'll also put in a couple of ideas about what the next webinar will be on. So the subjects that we can help you with that we mentioned, just a quick rundown of those. What about blended families? The do's and don'ts of beneficiary designations. What about tax and estate planning if you own a business? Planning for any family members who have a disability, emotional or physical, mental or physical. And also vacation property succession planning for both the Canada and also those properties that you may own in the United States. So, questions? And I don't know why I have an ampersand there, because it was just supposed to be questions, I think, with a question mark. So if you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them live. And in order to do that, I just need to switch and look and see questions that are there. So I'm just going to do that now. Will there be a write-up? And the answer to that is the video is also going to be posted to our website. So you'll be able to go onto our website and use it. Well, that looks like it was the only question that there was. So thank you very much. If you would be so kind, it would be helpful to us if you sent a link on to friends or family who you think might also benefit from attending a webinar of ours, because we always are looking to onboard new affluent Canadians once every quarter. Yeah, thank you very much and have a good day.